Let me say a few words about the content of the course and how the course is structured. It's a new course, actually, Econometrics 2. It was introduced last year, and it's the sequel to Econometrics 1. In Econometrics 1, all we cared about is identifying the average treatment effect, and that should be unbiased. So we discussed non-random selection into treatment and how we can address that issue. That was Econometrics 1. And Econometrics 2, actually, we go beyond the average treatment effect. We allow the treatment effect to vary between groups and over time. And next to that, we also spent a lot of time on thinking on how you can actually use the results of your properly conducted study for policy and or strategy. So the focus is also on sort of practical use. So what can you really do with it? Now, so these are the 5 different topics that we will be discussing in the following 5 weeks. In the first 2 weeks, we allow the treatment effect to vary between groups. That's so-called treatment heterogeneity, and also over time. That's this time-varying treatment effects. Those are things that are not covered in the textbook that we used for Econometrics 1. So it goes beyond that. And then in the 3rd to 5th week, and that's really new, and that really makes this course different from sort of the usual econometrics courses. And then we really discuss things like, okay, how about mechanisms? What can we really say what is between the treatment and the outcome? And remember the example in Econometrics 1 of having airbags and how that affects the chance of a lethal accident. Now, there are many ways in which airbags may affect that outcome. It may affect how you drive. Actually, it also matters whether you deactivate the airbags or no. And obviously, that if you do get in a car accident, then obviously that it may actually cushion the impact. So that's sort of the direct effect. So in Econometrics 1, we only estimated sort of the net effect of all of these mechanisms. But in Econometrics 2, now we're going to look at what we can say about the specific drivers of this treatment effect. After having discussed mechanisms, we go on to so-called strength of evidence. That we were very careful in Econometrics 1 in expressing our level of confidence. Remember that I encourage you to report confidence intervals. So not just a point estimate, like this treatment lowers this bad outcome by 10%, but also to mention the 95 confidence interval. But what does that really mean? How certain can we then be if the question is whether we should go for this policy? And on top of that, your study is not the only one, most likely. So what does your study really add to what we know already? And then finally, we discuss the issue of external validity. And then the question is, okay, we have conducted a study. It provides us an unbiased treatment effect. And we may allow the treatment effect to vary between groups or over time. But whenever we are going to pursue a certain policy, then that's going to be in a different time. Right? It's going to be in the future. The future may be different. Or it may be in a different place. Or we may target a different group. So how about the external validity? So in Econometrics 2, it's not only about internal validity. That's all Econometrics 1, getting an unbiased treatment effect. But in Econometrics 2, we actually look at, okay, now we have conducted our study. How can we actually use it? Now, so why is the course structured as it is? Well, first of all, it's fairly common that treatment effects vary between groups and also over time. So it makes sense to cover those 2 topics and those other 3 topics. Well, I think it's very important to really know what you're doing and what your work really contributes, rather than just going through the empirical exercise. I want to challenge you and to think about, why should we care? How does this help anyone? So the focus in Econometrics 2 is mostly on sort of understanding what you're doing. In that sense, it's more a course in research methods than sort of your typical advanced econometrics course. All of the things that you learn in this course can be used for your master's thesis. Obviously the idea is that once you get out of this master's program and you end up working in some policy or strategy related job, then with Econometrics 2 you will be in a better position to conduct good and meaningful empirical work yourself, and at least as important, you will also be in a better position to assess the quality and the contribution of the work conducted by others. The Econometrics 2 team is actually similar to that of Econometrics 1, so that's the TA, Antonio, and me again. Make sure actually that you add a picture of yourself on Canvas. That helps us to get to know you, and thanks to those who did so already. Now, obviously, since this course is the sequel to Econometrics 1, it really helps if you know the issues that we dealt with in Econometrics 1, and that's mostly the issue of selection, how we deal with selection. Now, another thing is that we continue to work with R/R Studio. So if you're a new incoming student, so starting your master's this spring rather than this fall, and you're not familiar or sufficiently familiar with R/R Studio, then you should really polish up your skills before starting the course, because otherwise you would spend an inordinate amount of time on the computer assignments. Now, I made it easier for you. Namely, if you look on the Canvas course page, you will see that there's 3 easy steps that you can take to get to know R. And I think it's a must. And you should really do this before the actual start of the course, so in sort of week 0. Now, the intro to R material has actually greatly improved thanks to the feedback from students that did Econometrics 1. So now the idea is that this introductory material has a much closer fit to what we are going to ask you from in the computer assignments. Yeah, and finally, something that I will discuss later. The computer assignments are to be made in groups of 3, and it helps if not all 3 of you are completely new to R/R Studio. Alright, so now what's different from Econometrics 1 is that we don't have a textbook, because those topics are not really covered very well in any textbook that I actually saw. So the alternative is then to ask you to read articles from journals, but those tend to be too technical. So the course material is mostly the slides, so the lecture notes. And I made sure that those are self-explanatory. If they are not, and if after watching the video clips you're still puzzled, then make sure that you raise your hand in the Wednesday session, the Q&A session. More about that later, because it's not like you can go back to the textbook later on and sort of read that and then hope that you understand it then. Structure of the course. Every week of the course has 3 sessions. We start with the reading and watching the knowledge clips. Then on Wednesday we have the Q&A session and a quiz. And then the rest of the week is for the computer assignments. Let me briefly discuss each of those sessions. So the first session on Monday is doing the reading and watching the knowledge clips. What you're supposed to read is going to be in the slides. It's also in the syllabus. Now, this session has been scheduled to take place on Monday, and I think it easily takes like 2 hours to absorb the material. And make sure that you actually note your questions, any questions that you may have for Wednesday's Q&A session. Now, I structure the material in the form of knowledge clips, and those are posted on my YouTube page, and I will actually forward you the links to those videos, and I'll do so on Canvas. What is a knowledge clip? It's basically a video of of a couple of minutes that covers one subject. Now, I would strongly advise you to first do the reading and then watch the knowledge clips, but do both before Wednesday's session, because also during that session we're going to test in a quiz whether you understood the material. More about that quiz later. Now, another piece of advice is to once you watch those knowledge clips, that you do that sort of mono. So you switch off your phone, you look for a quiet place, and so that you don't get distracted and that you can fully focus on the knowledge clips. They're not long, but they're very condensed. So they're very different from a lecture in the sense that in a lecture, I may repeat things, or there may there's interaction. So someone may ask a question, and then I will use that to give another example, etc. So here in knowledge clips, it's done in a couple of minutes. It's only brief, so make sure that you can really focus. The focal point to watch those knowledge clips is Mondays at 12:45. Now, new in Econometrics 2 is that we're going to use the Canvas chat functionality to post questions that you have when doing the reading, watching the knowledge clips. So you can easily go to the Canvas course page, and I made a link on the homepage. Here, check out the chat for Wednesday's Q&A session. That takes you directly to the chat functionality, and there you can type in your question. Now, why do we do it in this manner? Well, the great benefit of actually posting your questions before Wednesday's session is that your question gets priority. I start off with discussing those questions. And why should we have this functionality at all? Well, for some students there can be a certain threshold to speak up in an online session, and in this way, I facilitate that. It's especially difficult to speak up as the first one, and also in online session, there's only one person who can speak, and etc. So this is just to help you. This is also what I learned in Econometrics 1. It just works well. Why posting those questions? Well, and you can easily check the other questions, and most likely your question is already among those. It's fairly typical that more than one student has the same question. So that also means that you should not be shy. If you have a question, then most likely there's a fellow student who has exactly the same question. So just post it on Canvas. And then another final great thing is that I can actually have a look at those questions before the session, so that I can prepare an answer already. Very important if those questions are very difficult. So that's the first session on Monday. Now on Wednesday we actually have the Q&A session, the quiz and the assignments. The structure is as follows. We discuss a couple of practicalities related to that week. Then I provide plenary feedback on the assignments of the previous week and the quiz that we did in the previous week. So that means that if you do an assignment and you submit it, then obviously the assignment is graded by the TA, by Antonio, but given the number of students, it's more efficient to provide feedback in a plenary session rather than feedback on every single assignment. And it also makes sense because what we usually see is they say that there's 10 questions, that then there's always a couple of questions that everybody gets right, and then there's also questions that many students are not so sure about. So and then we can focus on sort of the common mistakes or the common issues in those assignments. After that we have the Q&A, and I start off with discussing the questions that were posted in the Canvas course chat functionality. Now, then you're supposed to have a good understanding of the material and to be prepared for the weekly online quiz on Canvas. You have 10 minutes to do that. And once the quiz is completed, so we do that in class, then you can start working on the computer assignments while the TA and me are online, so that you can actually also raise questions that you may have at the very beginning. Obviously, attending Wednesday's session only makes sense and only adds value if you have done the reading and watched the video clips, right? Because then actually the Wednesday session is useful to check whether you really understand everything. And again, that's very important because there's no textbook. You have to rely on lecture notes. So the Q&A session is also a very important check on your understanding. Now, to those of you who are new to the master's program and who did not follow Econometrics 1, there's this weekly online quiz. So you take it on Canvas. It will be self-explanatory actually. I'll explain it the first time around. It consists of straightforward true-false questions. So it is not tricky in any sense. The whole idea is that once you have studied the material, then it should be easy to complete the quiz. But if you have not studied the material, then you should have no idea of whether the answer is true or false. It should give you an incentive to keep up with the course. It's actually individual, and it counts towards your grade, so it's all graded. And if you skip a quiz, that's okay, but then you get a 1. And after Wednesday session, I will actually provide you with the correct answers. So that's Wednesday session, and then on Thursday and Friday you have time to work on the computer assignment or assignments, depending on the week. And the whole idea is that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. You will have to practice the material for you to really understand what it is all about, right? Econometrics 1 is all about application, so those computer assignments are absolutely essential. They also tend to take quite some time, this is time spent learning, and those benefits are actually broader than just Econometrics 2, because the whole idea is that you can use those skills to write your master thesis, and later on that you can use those when you are working after completing the program. Now, I did listen to some comments made by students in the first semester that the assignments in Econometrics 1 were sometimes a little long and took so much time that students had not too much time for assignments of other courses. So, I really made an effort to not overdo it. The assignments are teamwork, and a team consists out of 3 students. The keyword is 3 here, so not 2 students, not 4 students. So even though it may be that you have your good old friend, so you know this one person, still, there's not going to be a 2-person group, there's going to be a 3-person group. You can self-sign up on Canvas. You go to people and then to tutorials, and then you can make your group of 3. The deadline for submitting the groups is after Wednesday's interactive session. So that session is over by 12:30. So by that time we'll see who has self-enrolled in a tutorial group. And if you have not, and that is totally fine, and then we will actually assign you to a group. And we'll do it quickly because you're supposed to hand in your homework in the next week. And you should do that work with 2 other students. So those groups need to be formed fast. Then a note on teamwork. Given feedback from students from semester 1. I don't know whether that feedback specifically applied to Econometrics 1, but I do know that several students complained so they're when working in groups that there were always those students who sort of free rided on the effort of others. So how about it? Let me say a couple of things. It's not a reason for us to go back to individual homework assignments. Why not? Well, working in teams is also a skill, and that's a skill that you should develop because you will always be working in teams later on once you get out of university. So, and free riding is one of the things that you have to tackle. There's coordination, there's division of labor and all that, and you'll have to, and this gives you good practice. It may also have benefits in the sense that, 2 not more than 1. For example, I know of many groups in Econometrics 1 and that, one student would know how to do this in R, and another student would know how to do that in R, and the 2 of you, and let alone the 3 of you, can then be more effective, right? So that's one thing. Another thing is that given the size given the number of students, it's just undoable to have individual assignments because in the first 2 weeks we have actually 2 assignments, in the other 3 weeks we have 1 assignment. So there will be 525 assignments to be graded by our TA, and it's simply undoable. Now, what to do if those free riding problems occur? Well, first of all, try to solve it amongst yourselves. But if nothing works, then go to the TA and explain the problem, and we'll address it. And it may mean that a teammate actually drops out. But do realize it's not necessarily a disaster. Having a third teammate also creates coordination problems. There are benefits as I just discussed, but there's also costs. So I wouldn't say that doing the assignments with 2 students is more difficult than with 3. So that's not. I don't think it's something to worry about. Here's a schedule for handing in abuse assignments, which is actually also published in the online syllabus. And then finally, a note on grading. Grading is mostly, your grade is mostly based on the final written exam. That's 2/3 of your grade. And then 1/3 of your grade is based on your participation grade. And participation includes the computer assignments and the quizzes. And there's two types of computer assignments. There's the sort of the pass-fail assignments. That's computer assignment 1A and 2A. And then there's the more involved computer assignments 1B and 2B. And computer assignments 3, 4, and 5. Well guys, that's it. Thanks for watching.